This week on To the Contrary.
First, women, both fighting ISIS and others supporting the terrorists. Then, a curious love triangle. Men, women, and money equal no marriage. Behind the headlines, Wendy Davis as candidate for governor of Texas.
Welcome to the Contrary, a discussion of news and social trends from diverse perspectives. Up first, ISIS.
Security moms, women living under ISIS, and a Muslim female fighter pilot. Women worldwide are playing increasingly important roles fighting ISIS. Mariam al-Mansouri became the first female pilot in the United Arab Emirates military. She led her country's mission when fighter jets from the UAE took part in airstrikes against the so-called Islamic State in Syria this week. Meanwhile, an unidentified French woman shot video showing the lives of women in Syria under ISIS. The video shows a woman being warned to keep her face covered, as well as French women telling family members they are not coming home. The photographer used a camera hidden under her niqab, risking her life. Meanwhile, the terrorist crisis is changing minds about the upcoming November elections in the U.S. Security moms are back. This important demographic of mainly white married women is key to both parties. As a result of the ISIS beheadings, the percentage of Americans very worried about terrorism has just hit a 7-year high, with women 16 points more likely to say they are very or somewhat worried someone in their family will be a victim of terrorism.
So, Debra Carnahan, will the terrorist crisis drive women to the polls in November and they vote Republican?
I don't agree with their rationale, but I think Democrats have to be worried about that.
The reality is President Obama's rating between women has dropped significantly since last year, so I think it's going to have a trickle-down effect.
Security is a big issue for women, but I think that there are other issues like equal pay that will keep them in the Democratic tent.
Security has risen as a concern for all Americans, and I think they're looking for policymakers who are going to exercise serious leadership on the issue.
Okay, but even after these strikes, which, I mean, I'd like to see polling results after the strikes, which were just started recently, but will that make women feel more secure and become, you know, soccer moms instead of security moms? And we're talking white married women.
Right. What's interesting are the statistics showing that they don't want to go to war, but they want to feel secure. It's very inconsistent.
So how do you deal with that? How do Democrats deal with that?
If I were in charge, I think I'd be talking about how 9/11, we had strikes under a Republican presidency, not a Democrat. I'd be emphasizing those. I'd be emphasizing the lack of terrorist attacks in the U.S. since President Obama has been in office.
I think everybody knows that this is going to be a very long-term challenge, and therefore it's going to require the whole toolkit of international relations to deal with it, and defense policy being very on the game. You know, really having regional strength there, making sure that we are doing everything well on the world stage, and we haven't been doing that of late.
Well, and you're a Republican consultant, but I'm going to ask you, what would you say to how would you coach Democratic candidates in November?
Well, Democratic candidates, well, I'd say, you know, let's get mad about this and let's show them that this is our issue. You know, if I was on the other side, I would take the ball back in my court and I'd say, you know, we saw beheadings televised around the world. Why can't we get angry about this and make this national defense issue ours? You know, Republicans are traditionally thought to own issues of national defense and go harder. Democrats need to bring it back into their court.
I think that President Obama, a couple of weeks ago, when he talked about the fact that we were going to be issuing greater airstrikes and building an international coalition, absolutely did just that. He was outraged by the beheadings, talked about Islam not being this religion of murder and terrorism, that's not what Islam is, and that these people are co-opting it. And so I think that he was angry. I think the Democrats are angry. And what these women understand is that they don't want war. They want action, and that means diplomacy, and I think that keeping to airstrikes will do that.
And this war, if you want to call it a war, we have seen such horrendous things done to women. You know, 4,000, I think, captive sex slaves, essentially, and people killing themselves so they don't have to be sex slaves, and one murdered for speaking out in Mosul. How should our policy look at the treatment of women in war? Should abuse of women like that be just as important a reason to do strikes as a country that has chemical weapons, for example?
These abuses of women are just an extraordinarily terrible, heinous example of that which is at the root of all the wars that we have been in, and that is that aggressor nations are using means to terrorize their people and others. This is a challenge, I think, to what human dignity is and what a civil society, it's a complete negation of what civil society is.
I think that it's important for us to elevate the fact that these atrocities are happening with women, and it happens all around the world, that women are used as victims and are raped and are beaten and are, horrible things happen to them. And I think that that does need to be a part of the discussion about why ISIL needs to come down, why we need to get rid of this group, and it's because that there are women and children that are at risk.
I think President Obama had said long ago that we decimated al-Qaeda, and seeing all these new cells prop up, sort of, franchises of al-Qaeda, so to speak, I think that's terrible for women, because the more and more they spread, the more and more women are going to join those fanatical ranks.
And we saw the video this week that showed a woman saying, "I'm not coming home, I'm staying."
Yeah.
And what goes through their heads?
I don't know. I was relieved to see there were only 150, though, that had done that, which is a large amount. I don't.
And there
know
but there was a Kurdish unit of women that went out and fought ISIL somewhere,
Yes.
and they won their battle. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. I mean, these are really complicated issues. I mean, you've got the British Parliament debating right now whether or not to join in with us. So it's very complicated. It's very multi-nation issues. But I agree that we have to bring women into the talk about what is going on to make them part of the discussion as to how they're being treated and what our policies need to be.
Are we seeing women worldwide pushing back against women who help ISIS? Are we seeing any of that?
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen that. I know that there's a hashtag that is happening. That's I think it's called #MakeAStand, trying to gather support for women to push back against ISIS, and also to try and create an educational campaign for youth who are more likely to leave their homes, like I think you've talked about before on the show, that are 16, 17-year-old girls that are leaving their homes to marry these ISIL fighters. And so I think that it's really important for women to get involved, to follow the hashtag, to educate young people who are impressionable.
Yeah, why are we losing so many? I mean, there aren't that many American defectors, I would call them, to ISIS. But why are we losing anybody? Why are France and England losing so many?
It's the captive mentality. Oftentimes these women have subscribed to Islam, and these are, let's not forget, the fanatical members of Islam saying, they don't believe that Islam is a religion of peace and equality, and they don't believe that women are equal. And these women are just sort of taken by their captors, and they're taken with the mentality. They're mentally captivated.
What do we need to do to prevent these cells from developing, prevent these young people from getting so angry at whatever it is they're angry at that they turn into murderers?
Preventing the dislocation from community, from attachments to family and friends that would allow someone to be recruited to any terrible purpose here or abroad. Yeah, we have a lot of work to do, I think, at the family and community level. Absolutely.
And I just have to say, we've caused a lot of this instability in the Middle East. Well, we did it going into Iraq and invading Iraq and overthrowing Saddam, and there are all these different factions now that are coming together to be a force. I mean, there's a vacuum there. I mean, we've bombed all those nations. Who have we not bombed?
Yeah, it's true. So what do you do now?
Well, now we have to, I think, do exactly what President Obama is doing, is get other countries to come in with us and work with us in coalition to dismantle this group.
And arm the rebels, arm the people who want a state.
And it's so hard, like Joe Biden said, how do you identify who you're going to arm? There's 300 groups
And we've
It's
made
very
that mistake
difficult.
before about arming the wrong
I see a
people.
huge problem with
Oh
arming
yeah,
the
ISIL has a lot of our weapons.
And let's not forget what ISIL has done for these people. Going back to your point of why are these people going in, ISIL has community, and they've built communities. They've provided social services where nobody was providing it. So they're taking.
They've been drilling and refining oil.
ISIL has a lot of capacities, and they've delivered on a lot of promises to people living in those localities. And I think there's not much we can do when they've infiltrated so deeply.
Okay, please let us know what you think. Please follow me on Twitter at Bonnie or Bay for more to Love and Marriage.
Marriage rates are at an all-time low in the U.S. A record 20% of adults over the age of 25 have never been married. And according to the Pew Research Center, the trend is expected to continue. Shifts in gender roles, more women earning college degrees, and more job opportunities for women are generally cited as the reason why men and women are delaying or not marrying at all. But there's one more reason. Women want working husbands. 78% of never married women say they're holding out for a spouse with a steady job. The concern is that for every 100 of these women, 65 men are working. In the African American community, there are only 51 employed young black men per 100 young black women.
So you recently got married, but why are members of your generation not doing the same thing?
Well, they haven't found the right person, perhaps. There's a lot of choosiness that comes with becoming more advanced in career and education. Those things make you want more things, and you want somebody more educated, somebody at your level, if not somebody who's at a greater level.
I think marriage is great. And I've said this before. I just celebrated my 4-year wedding anniversary. I think it's very interesting that heterosexual people are backing out of marriage, and members of the LGBT community like I am are moving towards marriage and wanting to have that commitment. And so I think that it is about choice. 25 years old, I was not thinking about marriage. I didn't get married until I was 30. And so I think that we are postponing things because we're growing our careers, and I think that that's okay. I don't think these people will never get married.
Yeah, so we should be really clear here. The marriage rate is declining, but we are also seeing really high aspirations for marriage among the vast majority of Americans. So why this discrepancy between aspiration and reality? And I think part of the things that have contributed here are the sexual revolution, the feminist movement. Those things have changed life in many ways.
But having grown up during both of those movements in Manhattan, where a lot of it was going on, I don't think feminists or people who led the sexual revolution thought that it was going to lead to a disintegration of society.
I'm sure they didn't.
The way it has.
Yeah, and so all kinds of unintended consequences come from good intentions. And so what happened, I think, we've seen more women's education, we have seen more opportunities for women. We've also seen more confusion between men and women about that path to marriage and what it takes to form a healthy, happy relationship that can go the long distance.
Well, I mean, that's true. But, you are going to have a bit of discombobulation when you shake up the social norm.
Yeah. But why did it go so badly? I mean, I see it as having gone badly.
Do you?
When you see 16-year-old girls of color having a baby out of wedlock because Madonna did it or something like that. It's horrible. They're consigning themselves and probably their child to a life of poverty.
Right. But when you're looking at women taking more time and living independently, that's a good thing.
If they want it.
Whether you get married or not. Well, it's better than being enslaved. It's better than being put in the house and saying you're going to cook and clean the rest of your life, and then I'm going to retire and you're still going to cook and clean.
Except the same women are telling us they want to get married, and that's the discrepancy I'm talking about.
Men actually, I think that you put it on feminism and changes in social structure, but I don't necessarily think that men are very interested in getting married. There are a lot of men, and I'm talking about heterosexual relationships in general right now, but there are a lot of women that I know that are successful and men are there that have jobs and that they're just not getting married. They're going to be 40 and they're just like, I'm not ready to settle down. So I don't think that it's feminism. I just think that people are not necessarily looking at marriage as like the end all be all. And some of these people are actually cohabitating. So just because they're not putting a ring on it doesn't mean that they're not interested in forming bonds and connecting with one another.
No doubt the failure to commit is a challenge, and men exhibit that.
What about, you wrote a book about it, by the way.
yeah, about singleness lasting longer than we expect now and not yet. And I really do think that one of the reasons we see that failure to commit or the inhibition to commit is a result of the sexual revolution. I mean, you don't have to settle down and get married anymore, right?
You can sleep with who you want, and you don't have to be married.
Men get bored with that too. After all, I mean, in their 20s, but in their 30s and 40s, they want, they do. Their careers are taking off. They're working hard. They want to settle down.
They do, and that's what I found when I talked to men for my book. Yes.
I mean, in urban pockets, some would, they would say no. Men are still single and doing what they want. But I'll agree. I think a lot of people are fixed on, I want to get married one day. I want to have children, and they see those things being together.
We haven't gotten to, though, the issue of women finding men with jobs. Why is that such a problem?
As I'm reading those survey questions that say, why haven't you gotten married? The number one answer is, I haven't found the right person. The number two answer is, I don't feel financially stable. So what we talk about an economic speed bump en route to marriage is maybe as much a reflection about one's own state as it is saying that about the other. And we have had a steady increase in the standard of living over the last generation. And so maybe our expectations of what it takes, where you have to be economically when you enter marriage,
why would you want to marry somebody that doesn't have a job?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, if you want to get married and there's a shortage of men who do have jobs, you got to consider men who don't have jobs.
But let's be clear,
so
too,
what old... unemployable horse is better than no horse at all.
I'm just saying, if you want to open up the number of possibilities, people have all kinds of qualities that they, he must be X religion, he must be a doctor or a lawyer, he must be, blah, 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 blah. But how are women about thinking about, okay, he doesn't have a job right now, but he's going to get one, and I'll even help him and turn him into a working husband?
Yeah, well, I mean, there is that fixer-upper thing, right?
Yeah.
But I think again we're seeing different trends. Kay Heimowitz, Brad Wilcox, others have written about this, where well-educated women who have completed college or more, are that is a different life course than women who have a high school diploma or less. In other words, they are not getting married. They may still be having children. Women who have graduated college are going the typical life route of getting married, having children, etc. So we're seeing this really, I think, diverging trajectory that's reinforcing inequalities in our society.
Marriage is a middle-class institution, and so there's a reason why low-income people in particular don't get married. And it's because our federal government is set up in a way that when two poor people get together, they actually lose the resources and the safety nets that they need in order to have stable families, in order to be mobile, and so upwardly mobile. And so this idea that, why aren't people getting married? Well, we need to look at it economically, and we also need to look at it by racial lines as well.
What are you talking about? Welfare benefits?
I'm talking about the ability to be able to put food on the table. If you have two people that are making minimum wage, right, and then they come together and separately they're able to get the financial help that they need in order to live their lives, put a roof over their head, food on their table, but then they come together. The federal government sees that as a rise in income, but it's actually not enough to make them economically stable.
All right, and we're going to have to end on that very interesting note. Behind the headlines, Wendy Davis. The Texas gubernatorial candidate drew national attention with her pink sneakers and filibuster to stop the closure of women's health centers. Now she's fighting criticism of her national book tour promoting a new memoir.
I am a fighter. I've learned to just put my head down and fight for the things that I believe in. And I've found that that's a very effective way to represent the people that elect me to serve them.
In her new book, Forgetting to Be Afraid, Wendy Davis tells her personal story. It is a story about being raised by a single mother, being a single parent of two girls, her joys and her losses.
I wrote this memoir as a personal memoir, and I hoped that Texans and others across the country would relate to it in some way and that it would be of help to them.
Davis reveals in the book she had 2 abortions for medical reasons. The first was an ectopic pregnancy, the second more traumatic. Doctors told her that her fetus at 22 weeks had such serious brain deformities the baby would not live to full term. Davis shares her difficult decision made with her family to terminate that pregnancy and their last moments with the daughter they named Tate Elise.
We needed to accept and do what was the most loving thing for her, to spare her the suffering. We were told by 4 different doctors that she would likely not survive to term, that if she did, she would likely not survive delivery, and that if she did, she would be in likely a permanent vegetative state.
It was through her struggles her stance on a woman's right to choose was shaped.
The reproductive rights debate in Texas is one that is about women's health, protecting women, respecting women, making sure that women make these deeply personal decisions for themselves and do it with their family, guided by their faith and their doctors, and that this isn't something that government ought to be intervening in. I will say the same for my own personal situation, and I'm grateful that there wasn't a law in place that would have dictated that. I'm fighting to make sure that that's the same for others as well.
Davis says despite charges to the contrary, she is not a one-issue candidate.
I rely on my own megaphone. I've been in the Senate for 6 years, and I've been deeply disappointed that people aren't being represented as they should be in our leadership, that we have disinvested in public education, that we've disinvested in transportation and water infrastructure.
Opponents are also critical of Davis for spending much of her time away from her daughters while she attended Harvard Law School.
People will believe what they will believe. My story is my story, and I'm proud of my journey. And I'm proud of the mother that I've been to my 2 girls. I don't look back for a moment with regret at the journey that I went through to try to create a better life for myself and particularly my oldest daughter, who went through much of that struggle with me.
Texas has not elected a Democrat to a statewide office in 20 years, and Davis is trailing in the polls. But she says she's seeing lots of enthusiasm for her candidacy and expects a win.
The last time we saw this much engagement in our state around a race was that last race that Ann Richards ran in 1994. And I do believe that we're going to see that evidence itself at the ballot box on Election Day.
So do you think that she will win over some pro-life Texans with her story about having to have the 2 abortions?
I'm not certain if she's going to win over pro-life Texans, but I do believe that her story is very compelling. And the fact that the idea that Republicans have said that the only reason why women want abortions is because they don't want to have babies, when in fact there are many medical reasons that happen why they need that treatment.
It's really sad to hear about the loss of her 2 children to abortion.
Does it make you, as a conservative Christian, like her any better? The body of the fetus, you know, the brain damaged girl, they put her in clothes, they baptized her,
I have 2 observations. Number one, she is also very frank about the depression the post-abortion depression that she faced. That's a reality that more women need to know about, and it's why many women oppose the late-term abortions that she's supported. What I hope gets out in this discussion is that so many women who do face this kind of terminal illness of a child in utero find out about the option of perinatal hospice that allows them to deliver a child and have that child cared for in the last hours of their lives. That brings women closure and a compassionate end to what is a very challenging chapter in their lives.
I don't think she's going to win anybody over. I think it's a compelling story. It's a sad story. I think it also points out why we have to have abortion be safe and legal. In Missouri, we now
There's
have
a question about whether she would have been able to have that abortion now in Texas.
Missouri, we just passed 72 hours you have to wait. One of the most restrictive abortion states now in the country. She would have to wait 72 hours before she would be able to take care of herself and make that decision for herself. That's ridiculous.
Informed consent? I don't think that's ridiculous.
I think she looks very intelligent. I think she can make her mind up. And
Okay,
she doesn't need 72 hours.
Quick question. Did she run too early? Should she have waited? Because Texas is going blue, but it's going to be blue maybe
maybe she
that's
did.
Due to immigration.
Maybe she did, but you know what? Even if she loses, she can turn around and run again.
As a strategist, I have to say this was poorly timed, releasing that memoir. I mean, it's a great story. I'll give her kudos for that, but to me, she's much like Sarah Palin and doesn't have a shot.
Whether you agree or think to the contrary, please join us next time.